Awesome. Thank you so much for the kind introduction, and thank you everyone for tuning in tonight. I really try to make this as useful and interesting as possible. So please use the Q&A. I also have wonderful team members on this chat who can answer any questions you might have. Super quick, who am I? Yep, I'm the CEO and founder of Vidya. We are one of the leading AI companies with over 90,000 dental clinicians using our platform in the United States and Canada. And we have over 35 FDA cleared detections, so we've been one of the early ones. I'm also a Harvard Executive Fellow and teacher at the Harvard Business School about AI, and so I hope I can I can teach a little bit about this as well. And yeah, my background is from MIT, and actually I wanted to be like many of you here on the call. I was over 6 years in medical school and tried to become a medical doctor, but then eventually dropped out to found my first company in a healthcare spectrum. But healthcare is very dear to me, so thank you all for joining. What will today be about? So we have essentially three topics. The first is the evolution of AI in dentistry. Really, what is AI? The second is current applications of AI and its impact. Like, what are we actually seeing on the ground? What is true? What is the reality? And the third is then the future. Where's AI going? And what can we expect? So those are the three topics. And again, feel free to ask any questions in between in the chat. I want to make it as interactive as possible. But let's dive into it. What is actually AI? And funny enough, even though it's everywhere, to this day, there's not really a clear definition of AI. Here's actually one of them. You can read this, what it is. But I think the two things I wanted to bring up is, like, number one, it existed for over 70 years already, the concept, but we didn't have enough compute power and enough data. That's really what changed. And then we have new algorithms, but those are the only things which came to play. And the one big concept I think you can apply to everything is what you see here is the input, the AI, and the output. So there's always some sort of input, then there's the AI system, and then there's an output. And the better the AI is, the more input it has, the more data it has, the best engineers it has, the better is the output. And how you can classify AI, and you don't have to read this entire slide, but it's just like by different types of AI. So you see the overarching term is artificial intelligence. And then you have a subcategory of that, which is machine learning. And so machine learning, a great example is, for instance, your Netflix account, which probably many of you have. And if you watch these three shows and you watch every episode, and maybe some of them even twice, then it knows by all the data of Netflix viewers that it can recommend you also these other shows. Does that make sense? So if you watch Game of Thrones, you might also like medieval movies. So that would be machine learning and AI. And again, the more input you have, the more you watch Netflix, and the more users Netflix has, the better the recommendation will be. Does that make sense? And that concept is always the same. Now, the next category is deep learning. And so deep learning is, for instance, Alexa or Siri, right? Like, you ask Alexa, what's the weather like today? And it says like it's 70 degrees and sunny outside, right? That's the output. Now, I can tell you, I'm originally from Germany and have a slight accent, as you can hear. Back in the day when I asked Siri here, please call my girlfriend, I sometimes got connected, for instance, to my mother, right? Because it couldn't understand my accent. Now, though, there's so many users of Siri and Alexa and all of these voice tools that actually can now differentiate languages, accents, and all of it. Again, more data makes better AI. And then there are two deep dives I wanted to make. One is computer vision. And computer vision really uses images. So if any one of you here drives a Tesla, that uses images like a stop sign, right? The input is the stop sign. The AI is the Tesla models that are in the cloud that have been trained on tens of thousands of miles, hundreds of thousands, millions of miles. And then the output is that the car hopefully stops, right? And then there's generative AI, which generates words. And that would be, for instance, ChatGPT, Claude from Anthropic. It gives you a prompt, and based on a lot of data, it generates what should be next. So this, I hope, gives you an understanding of like what are the types of AI based on the data and based on the inputs and outputs. Now, how does it apply to dentistry? Well, honestly, at this point, all the different AI types are applying to dentistry. The one where we have been predominantly in the past active is dental imaging, so X-rays, identifying disease on dental X-rays. And as an example, how this actually works to develop this, which we had to do for the last years, is that we take a lot of X-ray data. So we, for instance, at this point, we are processing over 5 billion dental X-rays per year, right? Then, as a step two, we have dental experts or a panel of dental experts, which could be you, which could be even, a dental radiologist, for instance, etc. They are annotating and labeling that data. They say this is a cavity, this is an incipient decay, etc. And then the third step is that we actually deploy it, so use it in the world, and we get constant feedback. So if anyone uses, for instance, our software, you can actually reject findings, add findings, give us more examples, and we feed that all into it to create a feedback loop. And this feedback loop in AI is incredibly important. So if every one of you follows like the news, there's ChatGPT 3.0, 4.0, 5.0. Now they start 5.1, 5.2, 5.3, right? Each of them are new iterations based on all of your feedback. And we have the exact same thing. For instance, we are right now on carriers 3.5 as an example, carriers identification on 3.5, I believe. So that's kind of how it works. Now, an interesting piece is this curve. And, if I would be right now in a classroom or anything, I would ask you all, and we have like almost 100 people here, who's familiar with this curve? Because it's super exciting. And I would actually advise every one of you, or if you're interested in, to Google Gartner hype cycle. So this is the Gartner hype cycle. And every new technology goes through this hype cycle. So there's the peak of inflated expectations, then the froth of disillusionment, slope of enlightenment, and then a plateau of productivity. And so, for instance, AI and dentistry. So when I was at MIT, I did research in radiographs and breast cancer detection. And I think in the 2010s or so, there was an article from New York Times that there will not be radiologists anymore in 10 years, right? And so that was the peak of inflated expectations. Like they thought, they will, radiologists are not needed anymore. Then the next 10 years, honestly, nothing happened because it realized, wow, this is actually really, really hard. And now we're actually on the plateau of productivity. It turns out you need more radiologists than ever before, and imaging is super important. But funny enough, now you don't hear about AI in radiology and breast cancer anymore, but now it's actually used. So when you heard about it, it wasn't used, but now it's actually used. And so every technology, let it be 3D printing, let it be intraoral scanning, let it be whatever it is, let it be electronic cars, rockets, they all go through a hype cycle. The only difference is how quickly are you going through a hype cycle. So as an example, and that was actually my PhD thesis, I also dropped out. AI in radiology and breast cancer detection went through this hype cycle in 10 years. So take 10 years to go through it. Now, in clinical assist, this is like our name for X-ray AI, clinical assist, it assists the clinician. We are right now here at the plateau of productivity. We have over 90,000 clinicians using the platform. And it's very clear that we have very clear results, and we go through this in a second. So everything I'm showing you now is actually at the plateau of productivity. It's not experimentational anymore. It's also not heightened expectations. It's just what it is. And it took us 3 years to go through that. And what is interesting is that the rate of innovation is increasing. So everything else that's happening now, like AI documentation, like voice AI, ambient AI, which we will touch base on in this presentation as well, that actually just takes a year now. Like we developed it, for instance, a year ago, and we have now already a footprint of several thousand clinicians using ambient AI every single day. So it's really interesting that the hype cycle is accelerating. And one of the TED Talks I gave once about dentistry is I truly believe that dentistry will actually innovate faster than overall healthcare. And so I think we were 5 to 10 years behind of healthcare, but I believe that dentistry in 5 years will be actually 10 years ahead of healthcare. So I'm super excited about that. Okay, I hope this is useful. And again, I think everyone can look at this and find this in the internet to find more. But now let's go into how this is all applicable in the current operatory, right? How can it make your life easier, better, and what are the challenges and opportunities? So before we do this is to just say AI is, we shouldn't lead with AI. We should lead like, is there anything we can do in dentistry to support the clinician? And in dentistry, for what it's worth, we have some challenges, right? And I bet everyone on this call is pretty familiar with them. So I just picked a couple of statistics. Number one in four adults have an untreated cavity they're aware of. By the way, they are like much more adults have undiagnosed and untreated cavity, but 1 out of 4 has a diagnosed but untreated cavity right now, right? And we all are familiar with that because unfortunately we don't have the case acceptance on crowns, on fillings we actually need, right? The second thing is we have over 46% of adults that have active periodontitis, right? That is severely underdiagnosed and underaccepted. The third thing is that over 60% of dentists report burnout. And a large percentage of that, number one reason, is actually administrative burden. Like you need to stay long, or you multitask while you're at lunch to write your clinical notes. You stay long because you need to file appeals for insurance companies who denied your claims again. You need to refer out to a specialist. You need to call after a specialist. You need to schedule things. So much. And then one very interesting fact, and I worked before at McKinsey where we went into the healthcare industry, and there's over $15 billion in the United States alone that is actually denied by dental insurances. And experts estimate that 80% of that, 80%, so $12 billion are unjustified denied. So $12 billion should not be denied by insurance, but get denied. And so that's also a huge challenge. So I think we have challenges in kind of case acceptance, administrative burden, and then also claims. And I think these are all the 3 aspects where AI is helping today. So one last piece before we go in is one aspect I want to share is that you really want to think about the application of AI. I'm showing you now in a second, not so much as like point solution at the point of care, like in the operatory, etc., but more horizontally across your practice. So if you use our product, for instance, in your clinical operatory, it also helps you to, in the front office to communicate treatment better or to file claims in the back office. So you really want to think a little bit about AI as a horizontal layer across your practice. How does it help you across all the different roles you have in a dental office? And I wanted to give you that mind as we are going through the different areas. Okay, but let's dive in. Where does AI help clinicians today? And I'm talking here right now from a perspective of, having one of the leading companies building this technology, but also I myself actually visit a dentist at a minimum once a month. I'm trying to go much more often. At this point, I'm probably radiating. And so many, because I'm always taking x-rays. So many of these things are really like, from the field, so to say, and we try to observe as much as possible how clinicians actually work in their day-to-day routine, what their true workflows are, to not just throw AI at problems, but deeply understand where we can help. And so I think there are like 3 current categories where AI has the biggest impact as of today. The first is probably the diagnosis, the treatment planning, and the case presentation. The second is the clinical documentation. And then the third is the claims and the reimbursement. I hope that makes sense. So we want to go now through each one of them and share with you what it is, how it helps, or how you can use it, and then what the impact is. Those are kind of the 3 things. Okay, so the first thing, if you start your day and you have our product, some other product there, is that it actually takes in from your practice management system. It doesn't matter, Dentrix, Open Dental, Eaglesoft, Denticon, it doesn't matter. It takes the patient, the schedule, as well as all the patient treatment plans, and it takes all the dental x-rays and it AI treatment plans, and it compares them. And so at the beginning of the day, it can actually prioritize your day of sharing with you, hey, here are the most important 3 patients where you need to pay attention to these 3 crowns. And here is, for instance, these patients which don't have up-to-date x-rays, so really retake x-rays. So it really helps to prioritize the day. And it does something which takes, 30 minutes to an hour throughout the day. It condenses this automatically. Or if you actually don't do a morning huddle yet, it actually helps you to do it, if that makes sense, because it just makes it easy. Don't have paper charts and all of that stuff. One of the interesting things also, we have, for instance, an algorithm for ortho AI or implant AI. And it can even, you see this here in Rebecca Rommelfinger, which is a long name, but it actually flags if this patient, for instance, needs to be scanned for an aligner case, right? And that is another challenge we have a lot when you plan the day. You don't really know, do you scan every patient or do you just scan the patients that are more relevant? And so what this here helps is to really prioritize the day and prioritize the patients to know what to do with each patient and get your entire team aligned. Okay, so once this happens, and by the way, how people use this is really in the conference room, that they put this on a screen and they literally go line by line. You can select doctor and you can select hygienist, and then you see kind of almost like it's an automatically generated to-do list, honestly, a clinical to-do list for that day based on clinical practice management information, patient information, all of this combined. So that's what you do first. Okay, but once the day is planned, what happens when a patient actually comes into the operatory? And this is now where X-ray AI comes in, which probably some of you are already familiar with. And what you really see here is a classic X-ray with then our overlay. We have, for instance, 35 different FDA-cleared detections. And I think that's relevant because what it does at this point, it just doesn't say, this is decay and this is bone loss. No, as you can see, it can measure different types of decay. So there's, for instance, an incipient decay with yellow, or there's a more glossy decay with red, which goes all the way into the pulp. So it visualizes all of that, also the calculus, the radiographic bone loss. You see there that you have different colors, right? You have green, yellow, and orange, which turns into red if it's over 5 millimeter. If it's 2 millimeter or below, it's green, for instance. So it gives you kind of a green, yellow, red overview of the periodontal bone loss. Now, what does it do? On the one side, it helps you to diagnose, helps you to treatment plan. And also here, you see this on the top right, there's an odontogram. And so it even can provide you treatment suggestions. It combines all these 35 FDA clearances or detections and suggests, for instance, you see this here, this is an incipient decay, for instance, for periodont, super useful. Or here you need a root canal, or here you need an extraction. So it actually shares with you very easily on the top right, like what are suggested treatment plans. What is here really important to say is that the AI is an assistant. That's why, for instance, we call it clinical assist. So it assists you in your diagnosis and treatment plan, but the treatment plan is always owned by the provider because you know the patient the best. And also the X-ray is only one small piece, right, of the entire treatment plan. So I think that's an important aspect. But now, how would you use this in the day-to-day, right? And in the day-to-day, what you would do is first, when you come in as a doctor, so that, let me back up. The assistant or the hygienist or the dentist, they take the radiographs and it automatically sends this to our platform and we diagnose and treatment plan it. And so on the left side, then what you see is the dental view, the clinician's view. You can change the settings. But the first thing you do is you are at your own computer or in the back office or whatever your workflow is, and you look at the AI findings to make your own treatment plan, if that makes sense. Where do you think it should be a crown? Where do you think it should be filling? And whatnot. And then once you're done, you can approve or reject any findings. You can add things, etc. Okay, so that's what you see. And then once this is all done and you had the control, then you present it to the patient. That's on the right side now. So for instance, at Vidya, there's a button where you can go from diagnostic view to patient view. And this here is now used. The second is used to communicate the treatment. So for instance, you can say, hey, look at this yellow dot. That is a decay. It's an incipient decay. It's only in the enamel. And now is the good news. If we do, like right now, we don't need to do a significant treatment yet. We can maybe try remineralization and whatnot. Here, though, as you can see, this is already through the enamel and dentin. And we really need to do something. Otherwise, it goes all the way to the pulp soon, and then it becomes a much more significant treatment. So what on the right side helps you is really with a case presentation. And how the majority of our users are using is that they actually switch off the AI, show it in gray, and then switch on the AI to show it with the AI to just communicate more easily to the patient, if that makes sense. And by the way, we did surveys with patients, and it was pretty interesting that over 90% of patients absolutely reported that they appreciated this much more than without the visualization, right? So that's the first step you do. Now, there's sometimes the problem of urgency, right? What we've been seeing, and again, we've been visiting a lot of offices. Um, we've been seeing that um, patients, and probably I'm at that fault as well, are starting to argue that this is the same than 2 years ago, and why not just wait if it gets worse? The problem is some disease, especially for instance, periapical lesions, they are asymptomatic until they're not, and then it's often too late. And so that's why we built a progression of disease detection. So what it does is AI can automate, like pull the last X-ray, the perfect X-ray next to each other, and then measure and visualize the progression of the disease. So it's just one click, right? And you can easily visualize it. So you see it here on the left side. We have, the same tooth, the same patient, everything is the same. And the disease is obviously not as progressed, but unfortunately, the patient decided to wait, which in this case costs him much more pain and much more cost, unfortunately. Now, today, there was this treatment done, and now it's all the way into the pulp, right? And unfortunately, now it's probably a root canal, a buildup in a crown, and could have been prevented. But at least you can show the patient that and can tell him if he now waits longer, he might lose his tooth. And I think this is just important because in dentistry is actually from all healthcare is unfortunately the sector with the lowest case acceptance rate. And one of the reasons is trust. The other reason is urgency, and then it's money, and then it's fear. Fear is very small. And so this should help with the urgency. And in general, this all helps with trust. Now, once you have shown him this, you can also pivot towards this view, for instance. This is a different X-ray, but what you see is also AI can automate identify from all your intraoral photos. Sometimes you do that. And with one click, it can show exactly the right intraoral photos on the left side, if you see this, on the right side. And what is so exciting about it, we always say, on the left side, you have the science, the X-ray, and on the right side, you have the reality. And by the way, we know that if you show this or this, which we measure in our software, we know that the case acceptance is twice to 2.5x as high if you don't show this, which is really wild, right? So it's incredibly high. And then some softwares, ours does, we offer even automate patient reporting and follow-ups. Now, this is super interesting. Some love it, some don't use it. But the ones who use it have amazing results because one of the things we've been seeing is that on average, a third of the patients, they do the treatment right at that day. A third of the patients, they are scheduling the treatment out. But then a third of the patients, they say, let me think about it. Let me talk with my husband and wife about it and then get back to you. The problem is of that third, almost no one of you then gets back to you. And what they're doing is they're going on Google and they Google, hey, now they probably go on ChatGPT, right? And they ask, hey, ChatGPT, do I need this crown? And ChatGPT just say, no, you don't. And that's a big problem. And so what we started doing is that you see this here, you can send them a customized patient report. And then at the end of it, they can automatically schedule a appointment back in your office. And so we've been seeing that the 33% on average, every office is obviously different, gets reduced to less than 25%. And that's obviously a huge benefit. So they can look at their own treatment plan, why they need it, etc. So this is kind of like the 3 steps how the power users of Vidya are using the software. So the dentist diagnosis, you diagnose, once you have your treatment plan done and approved, then you showcase it to the patient, right? It's much easier. You can then also show to the patient, number 1, the progression of disease, or number 2 is also the intraoral image, right? And then number 4, afterwards, you can actually follow up with the patient and give them all the information. This is kind of like the best practice, how to use it. And then depends on your setup and how you do it, but it's actually pretty homogeneous that is a very good setup, right? Now we asked patients, and there was also a recent Forbes study where roughly 59% of patients say that they trust dentists more if they use the AI. Funny enough, we are doing a study like every year, and that study is increasing. So we'll do one more, but it seems what we are seeing more and more is that patients really want to go to dentists who use AI. We also see now, because we have lots of offices who use us for several years, that their loyalty has been increasing. So patients are they're going back to the same dentist. Funny enough, why? Because they know their bone loss and they want to know the exact same X-rays and if they're staying flat or not, so to say, for periodontal disease, as an example. And we are also seeing it more and more in Google reviews. So if you go, for instance, of customers from video as an example, you actually see it in the Google reviews that they rate about like, hey, they have this software. So that's a kind of an interesting trend. But then if you really look at the hard facts, this is now data. We randomly sampled a bunch of data. And as I mentioned, we have over 90,000 users at this point and 5 billion X-rays. So it's statistically pretty relevant. And what we've been seeing is across restorative and periodontal treatments. So to be just very specific here, if you look at CDT codes, we looked at D27 ... for crown codes. We looked at filling codes, and we looked at D43, 41, 42. So scaling root planning procedure codes and the hygiene. We saw an increase in case acceptance of pre-AI to post-AI of 22%. So quite significant. On average, people reported in a speed up of 2 hours per day through our products. So I show a little bit more. And then in general, we also saw the bottom line is like roughly $80,000 in production per patient, and that's probably 60,000 in EBITDA. Now, I think it's just like if we do the right thing for the patient and they don't delay treatment, the necessary treatment, then of course it also financially works out. But at the end of the day, our mission, at least, is always just like we want to support you to provide the best care to the patient and that they don't delay necessary treatment, because unfortunately that's happening a little bit too much in dentistry. So those are the results on the first aspect now from a lot of data and how to use clinical AI. All right, so that's the first thing. Now, let's go to the second thing. And the second thing, and as I mentioned, this case presentation, that was the first revolution of AI, X-ray AI. And that took like us 3 years to go from, first product towards now having a lot of people using it, right? Now we go into the clinical documentation, which took us less than a year from launching the product to now having thousands of clinicians using it. And the clinical documentation is very interesting because everyone talks about it, but I feel like their definitions are missing. And so I want to explain how we define it. We define our AI as ambient AI. And what I mean by ambient AI is ambient, it's in the room. So it's not necessarily a microphone, and it's also not dictation. You can use it for dictation. Dictation is like you dictate your notes. But what we mean with ambient AI is essentially that you started, like let's say you have with Sarah, you have a 60-minute exams appointment, right? From 10 to 11. Then our software, for instance, it starts at 10 a.m. and it records everything that is said in the entire operatory. Okay. And then after the 60 minutes, it stops recording. Okay. So that's ambient. The big advantage of this is you don't really need to do much. It just starts and it stops. And you can talk naturally. There's no change. You still talk to your patient, you do your work, etc. What the AI does in the background, it listens intelligently. So we have built our AI, and we have the advantage that we have a lot of data at this point, right? That we automatically identify what type of exam is it, right? Is that right now the general exam of the dentist, or is that the periodontal charting, or what other procedures are needed? And then at the end of the 60 minutes, right, we complete the notes. So what happens is that at the end of the 60 minutes, it gives you all the outputs. It gives you the dental notes. It actually automatically assigns to your templates, but you can change the templates if you need to. It automates the periodontal charting, as well as it gives you a little bit like some hints and what else to do. So that's what ambient is, right? Touchless. Very important. And by the way, this is launched, I just saw that we have someone from Montreal. Hello. This is launched in the US and in Canada, funny enough. What is super interesting about this is that we've built it that it can automate pick up who is the dentist, and it can learn who the dentist is. Does that make sense? So it can identify, okay, this is the dentist, this is the hygienist, this is the patient. And we record it, then we generate the outputs. But then after that, we delete the transcription again. And that is also in order for like legal purposes. We are all HIPAA compliant and so on, but you ideally just want to have the outputs, so the dental notes, as your medical record. You don't necessarily want the entire transcript in your medical record, right? Because of course, in these conversations is also said a lot of non-clinical relevant stuff, which is totally fine. And we had to build a lot of AI systems to filter all of that out. But all of that will not be part of the medical record, only the clinical relevant aspects of it, which you would otherwise type, right? So that is ambient AI. I hope that helps. And ambient AI has kind of like two components to it. The first one is automating the dental notes. So this is what you see here. So you see this here, you're recording the note and then it generates the note. Here you see a good example. This is like a full note generated. And you can use your own templates or you can use the predisposed templates and whatnot. And then you can actually just with one click, you can write it back into the practice management system and sign it. What the majority of people actually started doing is that they don't do anything throughout the day, and then just we have a dashboard, and then at the end of the day, they just go through all the notes and confirm and write it back into the PMS system. Or some do it just right after the end of the exam. So both users exist, to be honest, but it's much less multitasking. Now, what we have found is that the average dentist, which is really wild, the average dentist saves 10 hours per week, which is kind of crazy because when I interviewed dentists, they usually say that they are spending, I don't know, at the end of the day, 45 minutes or something on it. But we actually saw that they are spending a lot of time throughout the appointments and then at the end, etc. And so we saw in a time study that 10 hours were saved per day. Now, probably every provider is a little bit different, but that has been incredibly important. Right. It also is helpful for compliance, by the way, etc. Because like if anything ever happens, you want to have the right notes together. The AI also reminds you if you forgot something in the notes or if you need to explain something. The AI automatically flags, if something was muddled and not understood, etc. So there's a lot of things built into it, and it also has been trained on a lot of dental data, so it can automatically infer codes. And other aspects which might be relevant, right? Okay, so that's notes. And then the next thing is obviously perio charting for your hygiene team. And that is something which has actually existed already for a while, but quite frankly, the technology was not really there yet. So the majority of automated perio charting that existed in the last, 7 years or so, it had a lot of requirements. Like it had a requirement that you needed to have a microphone attached to yourself, right? And then you had to shout out 1, 2, bleeding, come on, bleeding, go back. No, sorry, I observed a lot how people are using it. And so now your hygiene team can just naturally go through it. And it just records, it picks up automatically, or that's perio charting, and it just writes it in the perio chart. That has been really, really exciting. And one of the things we can do is because we combine voice AI and X-ray AI, we can actually combine then the perio charting together with the radiographic bone loss you saw earlier to give you a holistic treatment recommendation for scalable planning procedures, perio treatments, referrals, etc. So it's a very cool combination where X-ray AI and voice AI at Vidya is like 1 + 1 = 3, and so that has been really, really great. Exactly. Also, maybe to just say that everything you see here at the end of the day gets written back into the practice management system, right? And so let that be Open Dental, Eaglesoft, Dentrix, you name it. There are APIs available to write this back, and some of it are built, but most of them exist. And so that has been really exciting in terms of like just saving time. Okay, cool. So those are the two concrete things that are used right now. And as I mentioned, on a high level, we have roughly 1 hour per day saved for the hygiene team, then 10 hours per day for the dentist. And if you map this to production, quite frankly, we have two camps. We have the one dentist who say, great, I will schedule 2 more patients per day. And then we have the other dentists who say, great, I can go home to my kids and pick them up from school earlier, right? At the end of the day, you can decide what you do with it, but certainly you have much less pain than you need to. To be honest with you, this is like one of the things I'm super excited about. As I mentioned at the beginning of this CE course, I myself have been many years in medical school, and I want to become a neurosurgeon. And I realized, like, after 2 hours of surgery, you needed to do like 1.5 hours of notes, like of write-ups. And quite frankly, I hated that. I'm a bad writer and I don't like to do it. And so us automating all of that is really excited. And again, I think there was also the question from David. This is integrated right now in all the majority of the practice management systems, including DPMS systems. So exactly. So we are integrating all of those. But David, feel free to also reach out to Jenny if you have more questions on that. Okay, cool. So that's ambient AI, in particular voice notes and voice perio. And so we are here at the clinical AI and the case presentation, now the clinical documentation, and now we come into claims and reimbursements. And now the exciting thing about this is, as I mentioned, it's horizontal. If you have clinical AI and you have voice AI, of course, we can also significantly help you with claims. Why? Because AI knows all the clinical information. At the end of the day, how do you have to submit a claim, or your staff, right? They have to take the CDT code, the treatment plan. They have to understand what payer it is. And then they have tons and tons of rules. They have, and by the way, I consulted for these companies, and the insurance companies make it actively hard. They make it actively hard for your team to actually understand what clinical information you need to submit versus not submit, right? And the reason why they do it, they don't want to really pay. And so what we did is we automatically read all the payer rules, and then we use your clinical information to automate that. That does 2 things. It saves you time, or it saves your team time, but it also significantly reduces the denial rate, right? And with that, the appeals rate. So you need to spend much less time on denials and appeals. You have lower denials, and you spend less time upfront. And so that has been honestly one of our biggest breakthroughs. So this is how it looks like. For instance, the first aspect is, is just eligibility, automating eligibility. So we have AI that identifies, all these things. So this exists right now. It can just like automatically identify if Baker Campbell at Delta of Mass, you see this here at this dashboard, like if it's actually active insurance status, etc. So that doesn't look only EDIs, but it also uses AI to go through the portals and figure this out. We've been seeing 40% time reduction and a 50% claim reduction, claim denial reduction. That has been in particular super interesting for scaling root plane procedures. So periodontal procedures are right now high up in denials with insurance companies, unfortunately, because quite frankly, we are absolutely underdiagnosing and undertreating periodontal disease, so that shouldn't happen. And I think the role of an insurance company is to pay medical necessary treatment, right? But not to make the treatment plan. So that's one thing. And the second thing we are seeing, this is actually crowns. There are a lot of necessary crowns, and they're pushing back on them and saying those are fillings. We actually have data to show that if you do fillings on crowns that should be crowns, the failure rate 12 months after is incredibly high, right? And so, by the way, just so you know, we also use that data, to push policy, because actually earlier intervention is just good for us, right? But yeah, anyways, so this is the automatic eligibility. And then the second thing we do is automate creating claims. And so what you see here is it can automatically create all the attachments for the claim. So it identifies the correct X-ray images it needs, right? It identifies the narrative based on your doctor notes. It writes the narrative automatically. You don't need to write narratives anymore at all, right? And it also flags proactively. Do you see this here, like needs review? It automatically flags claims, which has a high likelihood of being denied. And it gives you the reasons why it should be denied. And so, yeah, that is actually something we've been working on with several leading doctors and has been incredibly useful. It actually also reduce just the time you spend on the claims by over 90%. And I know that's most likely not you on the call here, the dentist who's doing it, but your front office staff. But if you are looking at the work they're doing, it's really, really frustrating administrative work, and it's honestly pretty easy to automate. And it's easy if you have the clinical context, right? Like if you have all the AI findings on the X-rays, we can identify what is a crown, why it should be a crown, and all of that. And unfortunately, insurance companies using more and more AI to deny claims, and there are some competitors of ours who do that a lot, and because there's a lot of money in it. But we, for instance, decided very early on that we want to focus on the clinician, that they get paid for the work that is medically necessary. And as I mentioned earlier, 12 billion out of 15 billion in denials in the United States is not really reasonable. And so that's why we built this product, essentially, to support you to give all the automated evidence to the insurance company. So that has been super, super useful. Cool. Okay, so everything I just shared with you, the case presentation, so diagnosis, treatment planning, case presentation, then the ambient AI to automate your clinical documentations, and then also the automation of claims, that is actually reality. This is not fiction anymore. Funny enough, I gave a presentation 3 years ago at Chicago Midwinter where I showed some of the stuff, the future, but it's not the future anymore. We have now tens of thousands of users using all these products, right? And so it's if you haven't used it yet, just try and see if it can support you in your daily life. But either way, I think it's really just good to know about it. Like maybe it's not useful for you, but like it's good to know like where the future's heading. And so one of the things we are super, super excited about is that we believe in the near-term future, 80% of manual and administrative tasks will be automated. And I personally believe, and my company believes, that will free up you to take care of what you love the most, and that's patient care. So if you really look at the everyday life of a dentist, a hygienist, and a front office staff, a dentist spends 30% of their time, 30% of the time on non-clinical work. I know, just think about your own day. If you're really honest, more often than not, you get dragged into things, right? Like, oh, can you please look at this appeal? This got denied. Can you do this? Can you write the note? Can you do this? Can you schedule this patient? Can you talk to this? So there's a lot of administrative work, which takes you away from the patient contact, right? The hygienist even more so, and then the front office staff, honestly, they have to navigate like 10 different systems, etc., right? So we really want to change that. And quite frankly, if that would have existed, maybe I would have become a doctor, actually, And so maybe that's my vendetta to get back, if that makes sense. But we believe like all these administrative things were just like redundant tasks and are error prone, they will evaporate. And that's exciting because what we heard earlier is 60% of dentists report burnout. There are much other statistics. The large majority of dental offices don't find new staff or have a pain that staff is leaving. So we have a lot of turnover. And so we hope we can reduce that by making it simpler. So these are like 7 categories, and I know it's a little bit overwhelming, where we see a lot of innovation in the dental landscape, where we believe in the next 12 to 18 months, there will be a lot of change in a positive way for dentistry, right? We will build and there will be an AI receptionist, for instance, right? Who takes calls, right? Who schedules calls automatically, etc. Then number 2, I think there will be more workflow automation in terms of referrals, etc. Number 3, there will be ambient intelligence. What we mean with ambient intelligence is think about like what we said, automating notes, peri-chart, but there's much more you could automate, right? Like treatment planning, etc. Number 4, there will be much better denial management. Like that actually just doesn't exist yet, right? Like right now, just a certain share of your revenue just gets denied by insurance companies, and at some point you give up and you write it off, right? We don't want to accept that. We think that they are, like most of the time, this is valuable treatments, and you should get paid for them, right? Payment and collections. The collection rate in dentistry, is not as high as it should be. Schedule optimization, like there's no shows and whatnot, and adjudication prediction. So all of these things will be probably changing quite a lot in the next future. But quite honestly, dentistry is probably the best industry I can think of where AI will actually help, because it will not like jobs will actually skyrocket because like you just have more time with the patient, right? And then one of the things we are very excited about, if you take this all together, so you support the clinical and the treatment planning, and then also automate all the redundant tasks, and you have a lot of data. Where's this all leading? And that's why once we called the company Video Health, like for the health aspect. We believe that with this long data, and we are seeing this, by the way, in healthcare, we can actually predict disease. We can predict if periodontitis will happen. We can predict if decay is happening. And then we can also predict chronic diseases, hypertension, diabetes, diabetes, and then even now Alzheimer. There are first studies that show a correlation as well. So for instance, there's one of the, I think it was a Lancet paper, which said the gum disease to the heart disease is a two-way door. And there's a lot of evidence, right, that oral disease is leading also to systemic disease, right? And currently, on $1 in the United States, 4 cents is spent on oral healthcare. 96 cents on a dollar is spent on systemic healthcare and general healthcare. And the largest share of that is diabetes and hypertension outside of cancer. Why? Because these are chronic diseases that are incredibly, incredibly expensive. You know what is one of the earlier signs of, hypertension is actually periodontitis, right? So if we can identify a periodontitis early on and flag that and connect them to the primary care physician to early on catch diabetes, where you can actually make it still reversible, that is really the vision and the mission we are working towards, of like not medical dental integration, but dental medical integration. And yeah, that makes everyone here very excited. And I think dentistry will play a bigger and bigger role in overall healthcare through AI. Exactly. That is it. I hope that gave you a good overview of like where we are going in the short term and the long term. And I'm happy to answer any questions